Commitmas 2015, the re-up. So I'm going to share my screen if I can figure out how to do that. And then we'll get going. All right, my name is Spencer Crum. This is the re-up of the Commitmas 2016. Get bash aliases for get aliases for bash users. Last night didn't work out because of some tech difficulties, so we're trying again with a different technology stack. My name is Spencer Crum, and I work at IBM. I work primarily on OpenStack and Puppet. I do a lot of open source stuff in those communities. I handles Nibblizer on pretty much everything, mostly IRC and Twitter. So we're going to talk about some Git aliases, we're going to talk about some bash aliases, and then we're going to talk about some bash functions, and then we're going to show off a couple little utilities that can make all those things a little bit easier to use. So Git aliases are really straightforward. I'd be surprised if you weren't already using them. But if you get nothing out of any of my presentation today, just add this to your Git config, and you're going to be in a better place. So this just describes typical alias standpoint. It adds a new command on the left that does the thing on the right. So let's look what that looks like. So we might get status. It's the exact same output as get status. Branch -a. We can go into repos, and we'll see a more interesting branch -all. One thing for CentOS users is that on modern Gits, we use 2 dashes before all, and on some old CentOSes, it's get branch -all. And Git config doesn't have a simple way to express which one to do, so you just kind of end up having to change it per system. Also Git checkout. So if after we already get branch -all, we can get checkout new branch, which just runs checkout. So we can checkout that should be new branch. We can get checkout master. Do all this stuff. We get pull. Pretty straightforward stuff. We did that. So there's some more Git aliases that I can show you. I have a lot of Git aliases in my system, so if we can. This is a snippet of my Git config file. But so what we've got here is we've got status, cherry pick, submodules. I use status and cherry pick more than a lot of other stuff. I used to do a lot of work with submodules, so having submodule aliases was nice. Don't think too hard about this. This is probably the most interesting one that takes a while to explain. So after you've added a file, so git rm git foobar, git add foobar status. So we've got foobar here, and we've got commit aliases. So if we would like to unstage it, we get unstage foobar, and then foobar is now back to untracked. And that's really useful when you've accidentally run like git add dot, or you've decided that the changes you have in the current working directory actually belong across a couple different commits. And it's especially useful because remembering this reset head -- is really hard for me to do. It's pretty unintuitive. And a more interesting repo, like the Puppet repo, PG begins to look pretty cool. I don't want to print anything. You could, it's kind of just like colors and branches and stuff merging in. It's good to show your friends. The longer ones, right, is kind of just some syntax. So you can't run more than one command in an alias. But with this bang, you can define a bash function and then run the bash function, which is kind of weird. So this is just the syntax we use, just the bang through this bracket and then this other bracket with the F over here. And you can just run arbitrary shell in the middle here. And that's, again, stuff I used to do when we had a lot of Git submodules. Generally, Git submodules have fallen out of favor. So I'd avoid them until you absolutely have to. And they're well outside the scope of Commitmas. All right, so let's look at shell aliases. So shell aliases work like this. Basically, it's the same thing. It's alias foo equals some command. And then foo is exposed on your command line, and some command will be run when you run foo. So just looking at it easy, we can alias shout equals echo, and then we can shout sup nerds, and it'll just kind of run it. You can take it a little step further. You can say echo hi. So now if you type shout sup nerds, it will actually just put the arguments to shout on the other end of the command, defined in the alias, and run it. So we're basically, we can use this to encode commands or arguments to other commands, not just the names of commands, which is pretty sweet. Okay, so we can show some really simple, so the easiest thing to do with aliases is just, that I do, is spelling. So I'm a bad typist, so I will misspell stuff. So when I type SL, because of this alias at the top, it'll just replace with LS and get it done. Same with makedir, same with a couple different variations on the word source. You can use that to make sure you misspell less. There's also a shell op that will cause your shell to simply ask you if you would like to replace spelling. But on these, it's hard-coded, and that's easy. So anytime I type SL, I did mean to type LS. The next thing you can do is shortening of things. So I have a lot of work to do, and I don't want to type words. So I can just type G and I get. I can type V and I get vagrant. I can type D and I get doctor. So I could G status instead of get status or GSD. I cleared that a little quickly. So the other thing we do with aliases is we can run entire command as aliases. So what we've got here is actually some pretty good get commands encoded as simple aliases. So things like get status becomes one line. GPOM becomes get push origin master. Get push origin development is get push origin development. GROM is get reset hard origin master. And GP is get pull. So these commands make it so that I don't need to remember the exact syntax of this one. It makes get pushing to master really fast and easy. Because sometimes you have a repo that you don't use the pull request workflow, you just push up to master. And get pull has some, you're going to type that a lot, obviously. So anytime you can make that faster, you're doing pretty well. You can also aliases. There's just some miscellaneous stuff you can do with aliases. So with URL encode here, I can just spit out, I'll just show you how it works. So you can URL encode, like, let's say the @ sign, and it'll tell me the URL escape that I use to encode the hash sign in a URL. I don't need to go to some web page and try to interpret what it's doing. BSC is also really cool. It's like, let's look at get status. But it's actually not going to work in this repo because I don't have a remote, but BSC is like, put it all in, and now we run get status, and we're back to a clean master with the synced. If there was an upstream, it would have been synced. You can do simple things. So you can alias, I just typed that a lot. I had an agent. I had a key to my SSH agent for 300 seconds. And that's just exposed as a command SSH 300. You can overload the environment. So UTC date will give me the date in UTC. That's actually not that useful because date-u gives it in UTC as well. But the pattern is that you simply say, easy equals, I don't know if I'm making this right. I'm not good at this stuff. Yeah, it sort of worked, maybe. Yeah. And so that doesn't just the date command. There's a lot of ways you can overload. Just by setting environment variables, you can change the behavior of certain commands. You can then put those environment overrides into an alias, and then you have a new command. You don't need to think about what the actual environment variables you're setting are and stuff like that. You don't need to export them on your shell. They're just set up and they're ready to rock and roll. So you can also do some fun things. Obviously, that's nice and fun. I got tired of knowing facts, and so I have some simple ones like alphabet, which just prints the alphabet. I have num alphabet, which prints the number, so I know that N is the 14th letter of the alphabet. Unicode, we'll just dump some Unicode characters that I use a lot, so I can just copy and paste the little note symbol out and put it in somewhere else. And ASCII, we'll just dump the ASCII table, which is kind of sweet. And the way that works, by the way, in case you didn't know, is that man, ASCII has the ASCII table in it. No more websites for us. So validation. There's also some simple validations I have. These 3 validations save me a lot of time. So YAML check, JSON check, and PPV. Basically just YAML check. Let's find a YAML file in here. Sweet. That didn't work. But when your system's a little bit more primed up, you can use YAML check and then file name to validate that it's good YAML. You can do JSON check and then some file.json, and it will validate that it's JSON. Because it really sucks to commit something and then push it up, and then 15 minutes later find out your acceptance test failed because you added the final comma to some JSON line. PPV is just Puppet parser validate. So I think that's all I wanted to show in there. I think I used all of those. So let's go back to we showed some more complicated functionality. All right, let's look at bash functions. So bash functions, we're kind of define them like this. It's kind of just like a Python or whatever. The name of the function, some braces, curly brace, arbitrary shell, curly brace. So on the aliases, you're limited to basically 1 line. On bash functions, you have as many lines as you want. You can loop, you can exit early, you can test, you can do if statements, you can do kind of all the stuff you do in a kind of limited procedural programming language. And it exposes this hello world as a first order little utility that you can use elsewhere in shell. Sometimes you exit your presentation software accidentally. All right, so let's look at functions. All right, so let's type. Just a second. Dates. Elliot Sandovich says yes. Thanks, phone. Thanks, phone. Okay, whatever. Let's type CDP. So when you have a bash function, you saw that I could set aliases with foo equals var. And you saw that I could dump aliases. So alias type is the way that you dump the state of a bash function. That's not specifically true, but it's close enough for us to get going. So CDP is, back in the day, there was kind of one repo Git repository I used. It was the Puppet repository where all our Puppet configuration for all our servers was. And so classically what would happen was there'd be like several repos, several files deep in this repo, and I'd be scared and I want to go home, and I just aliased CDP equals CD Puppet, right? And that's where the Puppet directory was. And so that way it would take me to the root of the Git repository. Well, as I grew up, I came to the point where I had more than one Git repository, but I kept CDP around as this function, which is kind of a simple recursive function that just dumps you at the top of the tree. So let's see what that looks like. Here we are. We're in repos, and then we're in Puppet, and this is the top of the Git repo basically, and we can cd into lib puppet provider file, and we're way down there. Git status still show. Git status shows that we have one file changed. It's in this directory. My prompt shows you where we are, and we want to just go to the top. And so CDP just drops us at the top, which is pretty sweet. And when we run get status now, it gives us the full path to the file that we changed. And CDP is cool enough to set old PWD. So CD dash puts us back where we were. So the classic example is like you do some kind of a rebase operation in this directory, and it errors because the rebase, the file directory doesn't exist in the rebase or whatever. You need to run whatever command from the top, and so you CDP up, you run the command from the top, whether it's get status, get add, get commit, whatever, get rebase, and then you can CD dash to get home. And all of the shell examples on this talk are in a repository called called Bastrix on my GitHub. So github.com Nebulizer dash. We'll make sure that's in the slides if it's not already. CDP is kind of cool, just a little utility that you can use to get around. What else we got? So there's also another thing you can do with functions is you don't have to be so generic. I guess is the way to say it. CDP is kind of a generic use utility. It can be used for whatever you need it to do, which is kind of sweet. But clean float actually just does a very specific problem that I had. I kept running Nova floating IP list, awk, grep, print for delete. Very specific use case. There was a reason I was leaking floating IPs, but I put it in a function and now I never have to type this stuff again. It's just in a function, and I don't use it that often, but when I do use it, it's available to me. So you can take that pattern home and use it yourself. PR is really sweet. So let's so github.com Labs MongoDB. Oh wow, it's doing that, huh? Okay, so we found ourselves a repository, and the repository has a pull request 407. And you go into the repository pull request, and you can kind of browse the code. You can click around on GitHub, you can browse the code. But what you can't do is like run any git commands. And so if you click, I think this button, it'll give you some stuff. But what you can do is you can just grab this 407. I usually get it out of the URL bar. Go back to your repository. CD into on the repository. And then, so get status. We're on master, and we can PR 407, and we'll just check out this pull request. And you can see the log. This is Bogan something. This is Bogan dough. So and now I can run the unit tests. I can git grep. I can make whatever changes or inspectations I need to do. Really lightweight. Just I have the pull request, and it's on a nice little. If you look at the branches, we've just created PR_407. It's really sweet and slick and easy. The way that works, by the way, is not actually that interesting. There's a little bit of validation, and then it's just fetch this magic ref that GitHub has provided you. That's not really in the Git standard, but there's no reason Git doesn't support it, and so GitHub just exposes it that way. And so again, this bash function is almost less about making something easier and making it, and more about making it so that I don't have to remember weird, esoteric GitHub specific crap. Let's see what else we got. Okay, so it's not really popular anymore, but back in the days, humans would burn CDs. I used to burn a lot of CDs, mostly when I was learning Linux and I was reinstalling my operating system all the time. So I'd have a desktop that would burn Arch, and then it would burn Mint, and then it would burn Slackware. And so I got really good at, of course, command line guy, the wodim will burn a CD is the point. So you wodim-v something ISO, and it will go ahead and burn that CD-ROM for you. But what it won't do is the one common thing that you really expect, which is eject-t. So what you can do with a bash function is if you type like which modem, you'll get user bin modem. But if you type modem, you'll get the modem function. And so there's like a pecking order of things available to bash. And it turns out like exported functions are higher up in the pecking order than utilities discovered in the path. Sweet. And so what that means is that you can completely overwrite an existing function or existing utility with a function, and then you go ahead and you call that function. You call the program from the function, and it's completely transparent to the user what happened. And so I can just run modem the way I would normally, and eject-t at the end, and I've added the -v flag. Now this was a little bit before I was super good at computers, but it's a pattern, and you should be aware of it. So at this point, the wheels really come off the train. Let's type Garrett. So the trick to Garrett is the Garrett function started out looking just like this. Let's take this version of the Garrett function at face value and talk about what it's doing. So Garrett is a Java server that we run in OpenStack for code review, and it has like an SSH API. So if I type like Garrett ls projects or Garrett-h, I think, yeah, it'll actually go ahead and say Garrett. Apropos, that thing that popped up was my SSH key asking me to allow it to be used, and it'll actually SSH over there. So we can Garrett. What can we do? We can Garrett version. That sounds good. That's simple and easy. So we can drop this version command off, and we'll report the server, the version of the Garrett server. So cat function Garrett. Sweet. And it's because, again, this is an example of me hiding data because I don't want to think about it anymore. So like obviously like figuring out my username is done with git config. Visual host key was no, and then this weird port, and then this username that is not actually my like Unix username, and then all this crap. It just drops it off on the other side, which is actually really sweet. But then things got a little crazier because so if you run Garrett-h, you have all these commands. You have index, logging, set account, you can push patches, whatever you want to do. But what I was able to do with this pattern was basically inspect the first argument to the Garrett utility and then run my own little program. And so Garrett now supports, in addition to all the other commands that Garrett supports by default, just by virtue of being a bash function, I can add my own commands to Garrett, which is pretty sweet. Now that won't work on this repo because this repo isn't really connected to Garrett at all, but that's not even really that big of a deal. If I was deeper into OpenStack, this was an OpenStack tutorial, that would probably work because I'd have a change for OpenStack staged with Garrett. But if you just type Garrett whip, all you're doing is you're falling into this little section of code that I've written, and I've essentially added new subcommands to already existing commands using this bash function overriding stuff, which is pretty sweet. All right, the last thing I'm going to show you in bash functions is under repos. Let's go into Puppet. So if you type git grep will search through the repository. Git grep is better because it uses the git indexes and it uses caching instead of regular grep, which will be slower. So if you git grep, hey, is my name in here? No, I'm not in contributors. That'd be useful. If you git grep for node name, boom. All right, there's a lot of instances of the word node name in this repo because it's Puppet. And if you run, I have some stuff in my git config that does this. I have grep line number equals true, which means that when you get a hit like this line, it actually gives you this little :92:, which is pretty sweet. And if you vim plus something, some line number, it will drop you on that line number. And if you type history rep or dash tail dash n dash head tail dash n1, you kind of get the last command in the history or whatever. So putting that all together, I've overloaded my Vim so that my Vim function, Vim is now a function that doesn't actually use, it'll eventually call out to bin Vim, but for right now it's a Vim function, so it can intercept. And the first thing it does is inspects my history. And it basically checks to see if the last thing I typed was git grab. And then it checks to see if what I've typed matches this file name :number pattern. And if it does, it basically replaces the line number with the plus syntax. So if I type git grep node name, I can just click this, paste that in, and Vim it. And this file doesn't exist, right? Because it's parse.rb :117:. That should be a file not found error. But it goes ahead and it just drops me into that line. And I can go editing. So if I type ls in between those and I run this, you'll get that new file error instead of a real file. But if you did it right after git grep, boom, dropped in. And so in this way, you can do things with some git vim integration. That's pretty sweet. Let's see, back to the slides. All right, we showed stuff. All right, so let's show some GitHub integration. What time is it? Yeah, I'm running a little late. It's okay though. So there's these utilities. So it's worth knowing that if you type git dash dash dash, you get all these, and have to have a bunch, you'll get all these like commands. So it turns out anything on your path that's git blark, you can access it with git blark. So it's really easy to add subcommands to git. And so what I've done with the help of GitHub's hub utility is I've gone into like MongoDB, and I've created a couple things. So you clone a repository, pretend we just cloned Puppet MongoDB. We can git pull, okay, and then I can type git fork, and it will go ahead and it will create the nibblizer remote. So git remote -v. Now I have a nibblizer remote, and it's gone ahead and forked Puppet MongoDB. So now I can sort of begin development. So then I can git checkout -b API. I can, by the way, we're making real changes to this today. Oh, maybe we're not. Anyways, we can just come in here and we can do. Let's just make changes. All right, we've made some changes. Git status, git add, dot, git commit, status. Actually, you know what? Yeah, git clone. I want to. Oh. Okay. We're actually gonna like actually change the code in like a way that makes sense. We're gonna make real changes during this webcast because that's how I roll. Okay, Puppet collect these substance. We have to make this change to basically everything. So why not do it live in a webcast? Okay. status. We've got one thing, and we're on a branch. So yeah, we're on a branch called fix PCCI, and so we can push Nibblizer fix PCCI, and then we can type get pull-request, and it will just created the pull request. And so we could just click, and of course it went to Chrome because the web is not actually a free platform. And boom, we have a little pull request. And we did it all from the command line. And we did that with a set of utilities that live in local bin, namely git org and get pull request. Got these things, and it's just kind of some shell munging, and then it uses hub in both cases. Yeah. So again, I'm Spencer Crum. I'm an engineer at IBM, OpenStack public contributor. All the code you've seen here today is at and I love talking about it, so if there's anything that you ask, I'm not sure I have any viewers, which is probably for the best. So I'm gonna actually stop here, but that's where the code is at github.com /Bastrix, and the code for this presentation will be up soon. So thanks for watching, and if you're watching on the replay, I hope you have a good rest of your day.